I apologize for uploading so sporadically. If you guys didn't know, I coach gymnastics, and right now we are in the middle of meet season, so my weekends are pretty booked. So yeah, that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for recording and editing. And anyways, right now it's really early in the morning, and I was like, what can I do really early in the morning? And I actually recently saw a video of Scalagrim. He posted a video called The Sound of Swords, where he was basically just testing to see which of his swords rang, whack his swords, and he just wanted to see what the sound was. And I was like, ooh, I have a bunch of swords. I'm also interested in seeing if I have any that ring or what they sound like. So that's what I'm going to test out today. I'm going to be starting with some short swords. Then I will be doing some curved single-edged swords. Then I will be moving to some long swords, then some great swords, and then a couple of complex hilt swords like side swords, rapiers, that sort of thing. To begin, I will be starting with this Depika bronze sword. Moving on, have the cold steel gladius. Interesting. Next, I have the zombie tools gladius. I'm going to try and hold them just at the very end, so that way my hand doesn't take the vibrations. Next, I have the cold steel Chris. The next one is an arming sword from Windlass. This is the Amazon knockoff of the Diphos. Interesting. Moving on to the curved swords, we're going to start with a couple of katanas. These are budget ones. This one is from the Romance of Men, because I suppose that's how you romance a man, with swords, obviously. Women take notes. This is the first time I'm doing this with most of these swords. This next one is a rather inexpensive katana off Amazon. If you're wanting something that you can go have fun with in the backyard and not feel bad about if it breaks, then this could be a good pick. Next up, I have a couple of single-edged curved swords from Europe instead of Japan this time. This one is the Kriegsmesser from Cold Steel, the new version. Let's see what this one sounds like. Ooh. That one seems to hold it quite well. What does that mean if the sword rings? Couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you. This next one is from Ronin Katana and is their two-handed, I believe they call it saber or falchion. quite different. Next, I have something from the, well, I don't know if this is actually made in the Philippines. Couldn't tell you where this was made, but this style of sword is from the Philippines. This is the traditional Filipino weapon, panabas. Next, I'm going to do a couple of single-handed curved swords. The first one is the knockoff Decapitan from Amazon. This next one I'm classifying as a single-handed, single-edged curved sword. Although, when you see it, you'll see that it's kind of not really a sword, but this is a machete that my grandfather got when he was in South America 40 plus years ago. And I was like, oh yes, I'm taking this machete that is older than I am from South America. I want to say this was from Peru. Surprisingly loud. Probably going to have to lower that in post. Try and do it nice and soft. Interesting. This next single-handed curved sword is a killage. These types of swords are common in Turkey, and there's a town in Turkey that I guess is famous for making swords. Off the top of my head, I do not remember what it's called, but this sword was made in Turkey in that same place. And I'm trying to remember the name of the company that made it. I want to say it was something like I Sell Swords or something like that. Found them online, was able to get in contact with them over WhatsApp. And in Turkey, I don't believe they're allowed to ship internationally swords from high carbon steel. So they make their swords out of stainless steel. They insist that it's fully functional. I actually haven't tested this one out to see how well it cuts or any sort of destruction testing. But in my experience, the stainless steel swords sound slightly different, so I expect that we will hear that coming through. Wonder if I try holding it from the guard. This is a two-handed curved sword. These types of swords are found in China. My Chinese pronunciation is probably going to be pretty bad, but it's something like da dao, something, something. This one, funny enough, not made in China. This one was made in South America. I want to say Ecuador. This is the Zombie Tools Reaper 3. That resonates rather nicely. Don't know if you guys can catch that. Next, I'm going to be showing some swords that are replicas of the swords found in the Lord of the Rings movies, or swords that are inspired by the Lord of the Rings movies. The first one is the Sword of Arwen. This one was made by Scorpion Swords. This one here is the first sword that I ever owned. This is the United Cutlery replica from 2012. This one is a 440 stainless steel. I wonder if I can hold it from the guard again, if that will make a difference. It does sound a lot like the Killage, but if I hold it from the guard, I wonder if this one will also change the way it sounds. No? That's not a sound I've heard before. What in tarnation? What does that mean? Couldn't tell you. Doesn't even sound like I'm hitting metal. This is the Honshu tactical hand-and-a-half sword that looks very similar to the Sword of Boromir. Double fullered. Not a fan of this tactical grip, but it is what it is. And apparently if you hit these hard enough, the pommels will just fly off. Interesting. This next one was one that I had custom made. I wanted to have a leaf-shaped blade, similar to a Xiphos. This one is inspired by Gandalf's sword from Lord of the Rings, Glamdring, and let's see what this one sounds like. These next two are swords that I had custom made, inspired by the swords from the elves in Lord of the Rings. This one is based off of the High Elf Warrior Sword. This one is based off of the elf swords from The Hobbit. It's pretty large and has all this space in the blade, which I thought was really interesting. The sword is to reinforce the parts where we took metal out. We added these caps, which overall I think adds more weight than it takes away. Obviously the sword in the movies has different shapes here. They're more elven, elongated, swirly, but that was more complicated to do, so we stuck with that. And it looks a little bit more dwarven in the aesthetic, but I like the way that it all comes together. The next two swords are Aragorn's two swords, and these replicas were made by Ronin Katana. This is his ranger sword. Sounds much different than the stainless steel one. That's lovely. This is the sword he gets in Return of the King, although in the book series he gets it just after leaving Rivendell, I believe. Next, I'm going to do a couple of long swords. The first one is going to be the Cold Steel Hand and a Half Sword. This is a long sword that I just got. I got it specifically for the pommel because I really like the decoration in there, and I also like the waisted grip. It's a maker on Amazon. They did not have very many reviews, so I had no idea what the quality is like. Haven't done any cutting with it. But so far, I am a fan. And this would be considered a budget sword, under $300. This is the Alexandria sword from LK Chen. It's quite nice. This is the Alexandria sword from Dark Sword Armory. Interesting. This model of sword was originally made by Balor Arms, and then Honshu picked up the model. Has a nice hollow ground blade, or I don't know if you can make that out on the camera. This is the English two-handed longsword from Windlass. I will not be able to get all of it into the frame because it's too big. This will be the first of the two great swords that I'll be showing. There is some powder on this because Windlass does not give you wood core scabbards. They give you just leather sheaths, and the glue that they use on those sheaths is acidic. And so if you leave your swords in the sheaths without powder on them, they will rust. They should really fix that. Example of a Danish Greatsword. Again, I will not be able to fit the whole thing in the frame because it's just too long. But these swords are interesting because the handles are typically about 1/3 the size of the total blade length. They have these upswill quillons and this nice big ricasso. There's no way I can gingerly hold this to try and take the vibrations off the handle. It's just too big. Moving on to the complex hilted swords. This is the Munich Town Guard sword from Windlass. This is the Munich Town Guard sword from LK Chen. The next two are rapiers, also from Windlass. Well, that's all the swords I'm going to do.